Hey everyone, thank you in-house for joining us today for our third installment of our Learn and Explore series. And those of you watching on Facebook Live as well, this is our third installment of our Learn and Explore series with Sam Sciarrino. He's going to be talking about the business of photography, pricing for profit. And before he gets into his lecture, thank you again, Sam, for doing this. This is
pleasure.
amazing of you. I just want to give a little bio for those of you that are unfamiliar with some of Sam's work. Sam's known for his unique approaches to portrait and wedding photography. He's an internationally known master photographer and owner of Horvath Photography, located in Toronto, Canada. He's a second-generation professional photographer for over 25 years and holds his master photographer degrees and accolade of exceptional photographic achievement, Master of Photographic Arts from Professional Photographers of Canada, and also a Master Craftsman of Photographic Arts from Professional Photographers of America. He's also been honored as a Triple Master of WPPI. Creativity, technical knowledge, and a keen attention to his clients' individual tastes has resulted in a solid reputation of creating work of exceptional artistic quality. And as a testament to the level of his professional acumen, Sam has won numerous awards and accolades for his work with WPPI, PPA, PPOC, and SWPP, and has been featured in numerous leading photography magazines such as Rangefinder, Studio Photography, Photo Imaging, Photo Pro, and PPOC magazine. Sam has enjoyed a personally and professionally rewarding career as a respected lecturer on the worldwide pro photography circuit, and it's my pleasure to introduce Sam Sciarrino.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here this evening, and it's obviously a pleasure also to be live streamed, and I'm really excited about this. This is a little bit off topic for me because most of the time I'm speaking about portraits and lighting and photographing to sell, which we're going to be talking about in the future. But pricing for profit is probably one of the most difficult things for people to really understand, especially with artists. Because we love to take pictures, and we love to hold that camera in our hands and new lenses and all that. But then when we're doing it as a business, it's a whole different thing, because we need to have a passion to photograph, but at the same time, we also need to make a living if you're doing it as a business or as a profession. And that's something that I've done all my life. So that, I've lived through a lot of different cycles in the business, a lot of different new things that have coming out. Now we went into the digital world, which it's a fabulous thing. To me, they're just all recording tools. Nothing's really changed. We're still handling images the way we're supposed to be handling them. The recording tools are a little bit different, but so we're learning how to use them. We used to have darkrooms, now we have digital darkrooms. Our quality of our cameras are just unbelievable now, so that we're still in the same position where we should be selling things based on quality at one thing, because that's what we're looking for. At the same time, with the quality, what does that mean? That means how you photograph it, how you light it, how you deal with people, how you when you're photographing, how you're dealing with people. And then at the end of the day, are they there to purchase what you're photographing? Okay, and it's a big mix of different things, just like any other business. If we treat it like a business, it will react as a business, and away we go. So pricing for profit, photography is one of the most difficult service to price and manage. Okay, it is one of the most difficult because there's so many different things that we have to look at. Most services manufacture a product, and then they sell it, or sell a service, or sell a product. Did I miss it? Okay. I missed this slide, didn't I? Okay, sorry. So, as I was saying, photography is one of the most difficult services to price and manage. Most services manufacture a product, sell a service, or sell a product. Okay, that is what most people do. So, in photography's situation, photography is a business model requires us to sell a service and sell a product. At the same time, we need to be an artist, an artisan, okay? And we need to manage the manufacturing of the product. So we're doing things from the start to end because it's almost like a handmade product, even though we're using computers to enhance and all that, but we're still printing it. We're taking it from one scale to the other. So the photography part of it itself really is a small part when you look at the rest of the business and how it's handled, how we're going to market it and all that, okay? So I put some images in there so that you can have a look at a few images as we were going, so it doesn't, I mean, for business, a lot of people think it's a bit dry, which I don't think so. I really like fooling around with the numbers and trying to understand it all because it just puts you in a different level when you can really understand it. The photography business is a complex business to manage and price. When the artist understands cost of doing business, cost of fixed expenses, pricing for your business model is achieved by following a fundamental formula, okay? So there is a formula that I basically follow. It's not something I developed. It's something that I've learned throughout the years and by mixing with other businesses and how they come and put this all together. If we're following the formula, it's going to actually help us figure out how much it's going to take to actually survive in the industry and how much volume do we really need to survive in the industry. Now, not everybody could be doing the same type of volume. Not everybody could be at the same price. Not everybody's at the same level. So it just depends on where you are and what level you kind of fall into. So if you're at a higher level where you can charge a little bit more, you can do a little bit less quantity because you're charging a little bit more. But if you can't get to that level, then you're going to have to do a little bit more volume in order to get the same amount of money in order to survive. So we have some factors in there that can help us get to that. Okay. So pricing a photography business model. Price establishes the value of a service or a product. If the product's perceived value exceeds the price, your client will purchase your service and product. So in other words, if your client feels that they're getting perceived value, that they say, yes, this product is worth that and they're going to pay for it, we're all good. If they're coming at you saying, well, I think this is too much, well, then there's an issue there. And we just need to figure out where the issue is. Is it the photography? Well, in most cases, it probably isn't. Or is it you're in some kind of a market that you have to kind of blend where you are in volume, where you say, okay, if I put this together and it's at this price, then we'll work it. So which formula are we going to use? Now, I put together about 3 or 4 different formulas there that can help us scale it through. And once we get to those formulas, there are certain products that I don't always keep at that same formula. So there could be some products I charge one formula, another product that I might be pricing out at a different formula in order to come up with something that is doable, okay? All right, so now the photography business model has at least 6 managing model functions, right? So one of them is marketing. We always have to market ourselves. We're either on social media and or newspapers and whatever it is, we need to market ourselves in different ways. There's no one way that just works. You have to kind of have many different ways. The other one is the portrait or wedding or the client consultation, where we need to consult with the client, see what they want, price it, and try to figure out a happy medium where they're happy and you're happy with the service you're going to put out. At the same time, they're going to be happy with the pricing and the whole thing, right? So everything is put together. Then we have the photography session. So now we have to perform to do a job that hopefully we're going to be able to sell in the end. So we're going to photograph for variety, which is a topic for another day. So we're photographing for variety. Then at the end of that, somewhere down the road, we have our sales of custom-made photography products to sell. So now we change hats again, and now we become salespeople. Okay, so from marketers to consultation and sales. So now we have to sell that product. Then we photograph it. We're actually selling the product as we photograph. Then we have to actually sell the actual product, come up with great ideas constantly, because it's not something that is the same thing every time. So we have to come up with different things, and then we have to be able to sell it. Now, at the same time after that, so we're building custom albums for wedding photographers, custom or portrait, custom albums, page design, and storylines. So we're trying to photograph so we can build storylines in order to create more sales. And then at the end of that, we have to manufacture the product and make sure we get paid for that product, because it's not something that you can actually sell to somebody else, right? So if it's a portrait session that you photographed, a commercial session possibly, or if it's a wedding session, I mean, if they don't pick it up, you're stuck with it. So, you know, your cash flow has to be, you always have to be working your cash flow accordingly when you're doing that. Okay. So each of these business model concepts impact the pricing structure to successfully manage a photography business model. Okay. So the perceived value of the quality of your work can affect the price and the volume needed based on your business model. Does that make sense, right? So we need to understand where we are in order to come up with a price. So I've always heard, how did you come up with that price? Well, the person down the street sells their 8x10 for, I'm going to say $10. I'm just throwing a price in the air. So I think I'll do $9.50. Well, the other one down the street is going to do $9. So it's going to be a race to the bottom instead of figuring out how to make a profit. And the profit is not because you're trying to make tremendous amount of profit. You have expenses to pay. So we're going to look at all of this and how we're going to break it down and come up with a number that makes sense for your business. Okay, so then these numbers have to be worked for your budgets, your businesses, and your flows. Okay. There are 3 sections in the cost and expenses of a business model. Fixed or general expenses, right? So they're ongoing regardless if you have business activity or not. So if you have rent, hydro, so on and so forth, regardless if you have 1 client or 10 clients, that's always going to, at the end of the month, you're going to get that bill, right? So we have to make sure that we have cost of sales type of expenses, because that's really important. So you never worry about your cost of sales. You just have to worry about how you're going to price your cost of sales. That's the main thing. Cost of sales is a great thing when you have that expense. So we just need to know how to do that. So we have capital expense. Any expense that's depreciated over time, purchase of furniture, building, equipment, etc. Those are things that that you amortize over 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is. You take, you stretch it out, and that's how we deal with that. That, I mean, is always going to be there because we need to decorate our places so that when people come in, you have an impression. So that's part of the marketing budget at the same time, okay? And then cost of sales or goods. A business only incurs cost of sales when you sell products that are purchased or manufactured for resale, okay? So that is probably, to me, one of the most important parts of that business that I never worry about. The ones that I worry about are the fixed ones that we have to try to control, okay? So in other words, we always have to have our foot on the throttle and say, okay, where's our sales right now? And if we stay within these factors, which I'm going to show you, you're going to have your foot on the throttle and you're going to have to either touch the brake or touch the gas, in other words, in order to survive that year, okay? And actually make a living out of it, and that's what's important. Okay, so the fundamentals of pricing, putting the numbers all together now, okay? Fundamental exercise in pricing for profit and volume is to understand what your costs are, to manufacture service and photographs in order to produce a custom product. So we need to know what it's going to cost us to do this. We establish the cost of a product and mark up the cost based on a factor. The factor is determined by dividing by 100, okay? So we're going to have these cost factors dividing by 100. So now we're going to take it to another level. Okay. So commonly used factors, okay? Markup factor of cost of sales of 40%. You divide by 40 into 100. This is a factor of 2.5. The markup factor of a cost of sales of 35%, you divide 35 into 100, this factor becomes 2.9, okay? The markup factor of cost of sales of 30%, divide 30 into 100, this is a cost factor of 3.3. And we can go on to a cost factor of 4 if you can get away with it, right? Now, does that mean that everything across the board that you sell would be one particular factor? Not necessarily. So you could do some weddings, they could be on a 2.5% factor because you're doing volume, you enjoy that. but maybe your portrait sessions could be at 2.9 or 3.3 because you don't do as many and you're diversifying your business, right? So maybe you can do some, let's say, commercial events, and maybe you'll be at 2.9 because it's somewhere in between. So you can decide where you want to be, but every one of those become little businesses within a business, okay? But the point is that you always adjust according to the volume and the pricing so that you always stay within a certain number, which you're going to see coming up. Okay. Formulas of contribution factors, okay? So the cost to manufacture a product is $100. So we're going to take a product, it costs us $100 to manufacture, okay? Multiply it by the factor. So using a 2.5 factor, the retail price of that $100 cost ends up being $250 because it's at 2.5. If that $100 product, we use a 2.9 factor, the retail price of that product becomes $290, and so on. At 3.3 factor, the retail price becomes $330 for that product. So now you have to decide, where do you fit in and how much volume are you going to do? Depends on staff you have and so on and so forth. These factors help establish the amount of volume needed by the factor of contribution. So basically, they give you a contribution. Every one of in between what the cost is and what your profit is on this, your gross profit, is your contribution that's going to go towards your whole overhead factor, okay? Okay, so the business. Qualify your client, be a professional to attract the right client, deposit schedules for positive cash flow, which is really important, especially for artists. In most cases, we deal, let's say, in wedding photography, for instance, and wedding photography, you photograph it today, you get booked a year in advance, 6 months in advance, you give them something to look at, they come back 6 months, a year later, maybe 2, right? If you go to your bank and you say, well, listen, you know, I want you to give me a line of credit based on all this work that I have, and let me see your list, and you might have 100 weddings in there that you've worked and they're part of work in progress. So they'll say, well, when did you photograph that? Well, I photographed that about a year ago. Well, what do you think they're going to tell you? They're going to tell you that that account is a deadbeat, it's over 90 days, it's over. So basically what you need to do is you need to have positive cash flow so that every step moves forward, okay? So that way you're always on the go and you don't have to rely on the banks, you're actually relying on your positive cash flow, okay? So your product, so that deposit schedules for positive cash flow, pricing for profit, product and image enhancement, editing setup and all that. What has to happen is your product cost should be no more than 25% or less, no matter what, of what you sell it for, okay? Your overhead cost should be no more than 25% or less. Your staff, including yourself, should be no more than 35% or less. And your profit margin, which is not full profit, but it's there as a profit and a buffer, should be 15%, which you're entitled to, okay? So what happens is, let's say you're in the wedding business and you make a couple of mistakes and you have to redo a couple of albums. Well, where's it going to come from? That bottom line, okay? If somebody comes into your store or your place of business and they say, well, listen, you know, we've been friends a long time, can you give me a discount? Well, it can only come from that part there. So how much of that 15% are you willing to give up? So you can't say, well, listen, I'm going to knock off $500. It doesn't work that way. Where it works is you only have a certain number to play with. How much of that 15% are you willing to give? 5%, 6%? You have to leave yourself a buffer in case there's problems or, you know, in most cases, hopefully there isn't. And that, you know, that's where you're going to be able to redo things. If not, you're going to go in the red. If not, where else is it going to come from? The owner of the business is going to get their paycheck is going to be reduced. And that's what you want to try to avoid, okay? So you always have to look at these businesses as they are their own identity. Even though you happen to own it, you still work for that identity. And regardless if you're the one that's photographing or somebody else is photographing, there has to be a budget there for that photographer to be paid, regardless of who it is. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's move forward from there. Let's take a business model of a $200,000 worth of gross sales. Okay, so if we have $200,000 worth of gross sales, our product cost in that $200,000 gross sales should not be more than $50,000, which is 25%. Okay, rent, taxes, phone utilities, car leases, you name it, all that kind of thing should be no more than 25%, and it should be, in this case, no more than $50,000 or less. Staff, $70,000 at 35% or less, and your profit is $30,000, which you're not going to walk home with $30,000. We all know that. There's things that you're going to be buying that you don't know is happening. Something might go up by 3% that you didn't expect this year because it just did. It's coming out of there. This is your buffer. You have to have it. Okay. Now, it doesn't have to be 15%. If you can manage, you can squeeze it in at 10% or whatever it is, because you might bump up the staff by 40%. So that means you're taking down your profit margin at 10%, but you got to keep that. It's there as a buffer. Okay. So let's have a look at the wedding business models. So for me, show me the money at the end of the month. That's what's important to me, right? Show me the money. Now, in a lot of cases right now, we're going through a process where some people don't like printing and some people like printing. The ones that don't like printing, they're missing out on, I think, a lot of income, and the business models are being, fooled around with a little bit. The ones that are printing are actually working through the week probably and making a better living at it. So let's have I have both scenarios here. So again, show me the money. How many sessions to create a sustainable business model? Let's use a $50,000 business model. $50,000 divided by $500. Let's say it was a shoot and burn and people are going out there to do a $500 wedding. How many $500 weddings do they have to do that year to come up with $50,000 gross? They're going to have to be out there 100 times, 100 different brides. Okay, 100 different brides. I don't have to say much more. Okay, so let's do it by contribution factor with some of the factors that I talked about a couple of minutes ago. $50,000 divided by a contribution factor of 39.10, once you take off the expense, is 13 sessions for the same income. 13 sessions. That's like one a month. Now that's doable. That's sustainable. Okay, so let's do this with the possibility of additional sales, changing the amount of sessions needed. So you can play around with that. $50,000 divided by $5,100 by contribution. That means bigger packages, better albums, so on and so forth, depending on the product you sell, because there are beautiful custom-made products that you probably want to sell, and you're going to make a profit on it. And that's what the whole thing is all about. And you're going to equal 10 sessions on that to make a $50,000 gross. Now that makes more sense, right? So let's move forward from that. So that gives you the opportunity. That gives you the opportunity to go out there and photograph, and it gives you the opportunity to work hard. And it gives you the opportunity to photograph things that really make sense instead of photographing things that don't make sense and you're running around photographing anything just to come up with a volume of images that will never be used. Okay? So let's do a wedding workflow with processing, and there's some printing in there too. So let's say you photograph a wedding, you photograph it all day, and then you come back and you need to hire somebody to process these files, white balance, and so on, so that they become previews, regardless if they're going online or they're going, you're still doing paper proofs. Some people still ask for that, but let's say they're going online, but somebody still has to process these files. There might be 2,000 files to process, right? Process, white balance, tweak every single one, okay? All right, so that's gonna, let's say that costs you $200 that you hire somebody to do, right? A photographer, I'm gonna throw a number, regardless if it's you or you hire somebody, let's give it a price of $650. I just kind of gave it round numbers. It could change. Some places might be paying $450, some places might be paying $850. It depends on who you're hiring, okay? A second photographer, let's say $150 for that, to have an assistant second photographer, okay? Then you have a product cost. You have an album, give it $650, portrait cost for blow-ups, another $150, editing and design, which could be part of the staff section, so we can look at that, okay? Well, I came up with a price basically of $1,700 to come up with this. Hard cost. That doesn't include your space for studios or anything like that. It just hard cost. If you sell it at a factor of 3.3 factor, okay, you're going to sell this for $5,610. If you sell it with a factor of times 4, you're going to sell it for $6,800. If you sell it with a factor of, let's say, 2.5, which I think would be a general where most people would be, all right, what did I say it was? 1,700 point times 2.5 equal, you're going to sell it for, oops, times 2.5, $4,250, $4,250. Okay, that would be your gross sales. Take off $1,700. That's your contribution factor in between. Okay, which becomes your contribution factor is $2,550. So remember that number because I don't have it on this here. All right, so total cost $1,700. Contribution factor, if it was a little bit higher, let's say 3.3, is anywhere from $3,910 to $5,100. What is a contribution factor? What would that mean to you? I've been saying that for the last 10, 15 minutes. What does that mean? A contribution factor is the difference between what your hard cost is and what you're going to sell it for, and it contributes to your overhead. So if you're doing a 2.5 in this case, and we're getting $2,550 every time, and you do 50 weddings, you're going to get 2,550 contribution factors 50 times that year. So how many of those do you need in order to survive? And that's how it's a simple way to figure out how many jobs you're going to do that year. So when somebody says to you, or to somebody says, well, how many weddings are you photographing? I'm just saying. They say, well, I'm hoping to do 50. I'm hoping when they say that they know they need 50, that they're hoping to do 50, but they really need 60, but they're not kind of just trying to float. They should know exactly how many they need for that year to survive, or you're going to have to put your foot on the throttle, either jack up your price or reduce your cost or do something in order to make things work. Okay, and this is the only way you're going to have your foot on the throttle, by understanding the factors. Okay, so 40% of, by doing it this way, you have a total hour per job, per wedding, per job, per production, 30 to 35 hours, 40% of hours during the week, profit on images sold. So basically you gave yourself a full-time job. Okay, so we're basically working full-time, or you're working really hard if it's part-time. Okay, so that's part of it, and you have much more profit in that case. If you're doing a shoot and burn, which seems to be very popular right now, let's say you have a 12-hour session and you're going to charge $1,500 for that, or $2,000 for that, and you still have 2,000 images that you photographed. You're still going to have to white balance, process, and all that. So it's not just what you're going to do that day, it's what you're going to do during the week to get the files ready. So let's say 10 hours at $20 an hour. I'm just giving it a price in the air. That's $200. The photographer is $650. That didn't change. The second photographer, $250. That didn't change. Now you have a total cost of $1,100 to produce that job. $1,100. Okay? If you charge $1,500 for that, you have a contribution factor of $400. Okay? If you charge $2,000 for that, you have a contribution factor of $900 to go towards your car lease, your buying of your cameras, your insurance, and all of these things. Okay? Now, the argument could be, well, I did it myself, so I got the extra $650. No, because you could have done 2 that day, and you still needed that $650 to pay for somebody, and you still have to make a profit. So it doesn't matter if you're doing it yourself, you're not the identity of that company. You own the company, but you still have to have the factor of, if you're going to photograph, you get the $650. If you're sending somebody else out, they're getting the $650. And the company, which is you, has to make a profit on it because you've taken the responsibility. That's basically business. That's any kind of, it works in any business. Music business, manufacturing business, the school business. All the businesses operate the same way. So we just have to have these factors working for us. So at the end of the day, If the total cost is 1,100, they're only getting between 400 and 900 contribution factors. How many of those would you think they'd need for a $50,000 gross profit sales? How many, right? Okay, so in this case, they worked 22 to 25 hours, which is about, doing it the other way is about 30% more hours, give and take. We're out to 33, 35. This is 22 to 25. You only work weekends only, and there's no profit on images. So your gross profit is somewhere around $400. You got enough to pay a car lease, maybe, right? And that's what's happening. So we need to be able to print it. The equipment is made to do that. I mean, we came out now with this beautiful camera. There's a D850 that is so smart, and the files are so big that you could be making works of art within album pages, within portraits on the wall, all of these things. It's there for a reason, right? And the business was always created there for a reason. So we just have to take it to that level. It's just a matter of understanding how the whole thing works. Okay, so let's switch over now and let's talk about some family portraits, because I think most portrait type studios need to be diversified. You can't just do weddings. There's no such thing as that in today. It never was, okay? Even going back 20, 30 years ago, the photographic studios always did more than just weddings. They did first communions, they did portraits, they did passport pictures, they did reproductions, they did everything. They sold cameras, they sold film, they sold anything you can put possibly that had to do with photography, because everything was there to make a contribution factor, not a profit, a contribution factor to the end of the month, okay, which is paying for employees and so on and so forth, and paying for the things that we need. So in a family portrait, it's another, here we go again. Now, if it's files only, session fee with files, I heard, anywhere from $150 to $400 are out there, photographing from, let's say, 2 hours, 1 hour to 4 hours, 5 hours, okay? They give them edited files to boot so that they can go get them printed somewhere. Which is fine if that is your business model, but realistically, I think that that's how you're going to create things during the week as a job for yourself, and how you're going to be able to pay for your model, your business model, your rent, and so on and so forth, your employees, okay? So it's and then you have no print sales, so you're not going to make any profit on that. Now, if you just love to photograph people and you enjoy that, I could see that. But if you're doing other things, I don't see that. Okay, so let's change this up a little bit, and let's go into another thing. Let's say now we have a family portrait, we have a session fee, and the session fee could be from small to big, depending on how many hours, and there's a sale of prints and or portraits. So let's say you have a small session fee, 45 minutes an hour, $165 for a small session fee, or a larger one, $500 for a large session fee, and all you're doing is photographing and you're white balancing these files so that they're there for viewing, so that you can create sales from that. That's all it is, okay? And with that, you're going to create some things where you're going to create an interest to sell, okay? We need to create an interest to sell, all right? And that's the whole thing. It's like walking into a car dealership and they have a shiny, beautiful vehicle there that has beautiful pinstripes and all that. And we have to figure out the same thing to do with the photography business. What products are we going to sell with our custom-made product, okay? So our minimum orders have to be in place where you're qualifying this client on the phone and say, how much is your session fee? Well, okay, the session fee could be $165. What do you do for that? We're out there for an hour and so on and so forth. But there's a $280 printer portrait order that needs to be as a minimum. Has to be, because other than that, why are we going out there? Why would you start your car and go there? Okay, so that's the way it should, and that would be a start. So automatically now, where are we? We're at 384 something. We're starting to get somewhere. Okay, all right. A $500 location print or portrait fee goes with the bigger session fee. So if you're out there for 3-4 hours and you're charging $500 for the session, then you need a minimum of $500 portrait or print fee, okay? So now you've guaranteed yourself $1,000 to go out there, and it might take you 3/4 of a day. By the time you white balance it, and then you sit there and sell it. Think of all the time that it's going to take, and all the equipment you need, projectors and so on and so forth, in order to create these sales and manufacture this. Okay. Okay, so portrait business models. Show me the money again at the end of the month. How many sessions to create a sustainable business model? So let's say we use a $50,000 business model for our portraits. Okay, so if you notice, I've used 50,000 for one thing, 50,000 for that, and I'm keeping the numbers very moderate. Okay, so let's use a $50,000 business model. 50,000 divided by $250 that somebody would probably want to charge for files only equals 200 sessions a year. Is it doable? You'll be banging your head against the wall, that's for sure. I mean, it's just, all right. $50,000 divided by $750 equals 66 sessions a year. Now that's doable because your we have 52 weeks a year, some Saturdays or wherever during the week, you're going to do a little bit more. You probably can get away with a little bit more, and at the same time, you're going to be working it through the week, and you can actually create good income out of this, okay? And that's the point, is that we want to create good income out of this, and everything needs to be sustainable. What happens if you have $50,000 divided by each session being $1,000? Now we have 50 sessions per year. That's less than one a week, and you can actually do not too bad compared, you know, if you put the portrait part of it in there and some of that wedding part of it in there at 13 sessions. Not bad. It's all doable now, right? It's sustainable business. Okay. What do you do with images that have not been printed? What do you think happens to them? What is the perceived value to them? What is the question to that? What happens to these images? What happens to them? They're worth nothing if the perceived value is worth nothing. If nobody wants to buy them, or we're just putting things up on social media, nobody wants to buy these. You know, at best, what happens to them? What do you do with an image that has been uploaded to social media? Maybe press the like button. Okay? Are you getting paid for that? But there's a place for social media because it's a marketing stream. So where that is, for me, is that I spend about a half an hour a day, 45 minutes a day, and I put something on there because that's part of my marketing budget. Okay? I have 5% of my business, 5% gross, is marketing. Okay, so 5 to 7% is what I've allocated. So social media is part of it, and other things are part of it, and that's where I spend it. So that's all it is for me, is just marketing. Don't care if somebody likes it or not, meaning they're going to press the like button, because you're not always going to get that. Okay, and believe me, some people are going to like it, and they're not going to press the like button. So it's not about that. It's about catching that client, saying, "Hey, I'd love to talk to this photographer. Maybe that's a style I would like." That's good, and just creating buzz, and that's all we're doing, and that's all it's there for. So how do we create revenue with a fine art image? You know, I think about things like that all the time. How are we going to create revenue? Like, I look at things, how am I going to create revenue with some of my travel images, right? That's just the way it is. That's the way I'm programmed. I love to photograph, but at the same time, I want to create revenue at the same time. So there has to be an interest, and we have to create the interest, okay? So by creating a must-have situation and sell it, that's what we need to do. And that's part of the sales end. Now, when we switch our hat and these people come in and you have a passion for what you photographed and now you want to sell it, they have to feel it from you and by what you think and how it should be and what you have just created and what product you're trying to sell. And sometimes you're winging it because that's what happens. Your head is going 100 miles an hour and you're coming up with ideas that you've never thought about, and which is the greatest thing, and you can just be talking about it. Now you have to go produce it. Now, if you're an artist, it shouldn't be that hard to produce. If you think it, you can probably do it, okay? You can probably do it, and I've done that many times. And that's just about believing in what you're doing, right? So we have to believe it, we have to be able to print it, and we have to give them a product that they can't get at any department store, okay? So anything a department store sells, don't sell it, in other words. Because then you're going to be always compared to, why can I get it for this? Well, they didn't create the image. You created the image, okay? It's just like the painters of a long time ago, right? Why is it that Leonardo da Vinci's paintings are worth a fortune? They use paint and they use the brush. But is the person that did it, that created this perceived value of that artistic piece. And that's what is important, is to take it to that level. And you got to walk the walk, you got to talk the talk, you got to do the whole thing. It's both. And just remember where you are and just be in that level, and everything works. Okay. So, manufactured custom-made portrait albums, and fine art portraits as an artistic or artisan. All of these things put together. For me, it's about selling the books, selling the portraits in sets of 3 with the frames, and the frames don't have to be gaudy. They just have to be simple frames. They don't have to cost a lot. You just have to make your factor on it and walk away, right? And when people look at it, they're going to say, hey, that's a Sciarrino portrait. Perfect. It's all good, and they're going to pay the piper for it, meaning they're going to pay the proper price. If I want to give them a discount and I want to take it out of my 10% at the bottom line, it's my business. If I want to give them 5%, it's your business if it's in your business. But you can't do more than that. We just need to know where we are. Because at the end of the month, when we have to pay our rents and all that, nobody's there for you but yourself, right? And that's the whole thing, and we have to keep that all in mind. Okay. So we definitely have to think about things that we do. We have to think deep sometimes and just keep things in perspective. Okay? So we capture and create the moment using light, composition, form, and shape, and texture. And create the story, create the fantasy, and then we need to sell the fantasy. Okay? We sell it, and we have to make a profit at the same time by using the factors. Okay? And wow, the timing's impeccable. Okay, so at this point, I'm hoping for some questions. And do you have questions for me?
Yeah, so anybody has any questions? Hand the microphone over.
I'm just curious how you implement the mandatory purchase amount with your clients. Because as a client, I would think, what if I don't like the pictures that he's taken, and yet I'm forced to buy $300 in prints? So how do you communicate that to your
Well,
client?
obviously the client has to be happy with the portraits, and to start with. Now, if the client is not happy, I mean, we're talking about family portraits here and things like that. If the client is not happy with the photo session, obviously you're not going to be happy with the photo session. You're not going to be able to make a great sale out of it. Then you have to offer to redo it, to reshoot it at no charge. Okay, that's part of service, right? And you can't look at something like that and say, now I'm going to go out there and I'm going to lose 2 hours. No, you didn't lose 2 hours. You're going to try to regain your profit and your sales, because that's basically what could be a problem. So at the very worst, they won't come back and place that order because you can't really force it, right? In a way, you can't really force it. So it'll sit in limbo for years. And that's what you don't want, is to sit in limbo for years. You want to create that interest where they want to buy this and they have to buy quick. If there any time that there are kids involved, small kids involved, the sale has to be done very quick. Because if it's not done very quick and it's done 6 months down the road, a year down the road, for whatever reason, clients get into a state of saying, well, my child has changed now, the image is worthless. And for me, I'm thinking, no, it has more value today than it did a year ago, because this child will never look like that again. And that would be my answer to that. But you have to make them understand it, right? And then they'll come around. But the first thing is okay, let's get a new one, because the old one's, it's like buying a car, but it's not, right? It actually has more value a year down the road. So, yeah, I would just make sure, in other words, and just reshoot it and try to figure out what it was that they didn't like. And a lot of times it could be not something that you did. It could be a hairstyle. It could be didn't like what they were wearing. It could be anything, right? And we just have to understand it, and sometimes just go ahead and redo it.
Sam, thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you.
I want to commend you on encouraging artists to make prints.
Thank you.
Do you suggest to a new photographer or someone a graphic business, that they should learn to print themselves or job that out to a professional eye?
Well,
Obviously, the cost model changes, but I'd like to hear your input.
I think if a photographer at the beginning shouldn't have to do their own printing. I think they are really busy focusing on marketing and getting clients at the beginning, or they should job that out. Unless they can't afford it and they really need to adjust their bottom line accordingly if they have the time. If they're not doing much, then they have the time to do it. So they're going to have to really adjust that, and they're going to have to learn how things work. And eventually, things work out in that benefit. Once we get into some of the other segments, there are things that we'll talk about that are great money makers moving forward. But that would be my thing. I think at the beginning they should job it out and then eventually learn to print themselves. Yeah, some things, not all of it, just some, because there are books and albums that you can't print yourself. They have to go out. Yeah.
Hey, Sam, question regarding, I guess the market. So let's say you fire up your spreadsheet, you do the calculations, you get an X price, but the market is somewhere else in terms of the pricing. It's not where you want, where you would like it to be.
Yes.
What do you do? I mean,
Well, okay, that's a great question. What you do is you have to go into one of the lower end factors, let's say the 2.5 factor, but you're going to have to build your volume. So, for instance, these are guidelines. If for whatever reason the 2.5 factor is not working in your market and the 2.3 might be working, then you go to the 2.3. The only thing you have to be careful of is you have to keep your overhead very, very tight, and you're going to be doing a lot more volume. So, and that's the thing. And it's a balancing act, because there's no magic formula or magic pill to this. You have to know exactly where you are. And I think out of all the years that I've been in this, I think the biggest secret is overhead. The part that never changes, regardless if you get one client or 10. That part of it is the trickiest thing, because we all love big spaces, we all love the fancy couches and all that kind of thing. But if you don't have the right volume at the right price, that could jeopardize what we're doing. So you're better always have smaller spaces, and as your business increases, you can start to grow, but don't jump into something just because that's what you like, and hopefully you can make it grow within that, because it's very hard to do. And part of it is if you need, for instance, $10,000 a month to operate, and one month you did 6, another month you did 7, another month you did 12, then you did 5, and you're always below that, you're going to fall so fast. Within 6 months, you'll be so deep that it's hard to get out of there. So you're always better off. In other words, I was always told, if you have a size 6 foot, buy a size 6 shoe, right? Don't buy a size 10 shoe and try to get that foot and wait for your foot to grow. Okay, so it's the same idea. That makes sense? Kind of, yeah. And you keep working and keep marketing, but keep it tight and then just make it grow. So you might have to steal a little bit on the factor, and you might have to steal a little bit on the bottom end of the 15%. So you might have to steal 2 or 5% from there to make it grow, right? Just a little bit, and move forward until it fills itself up.
Hey Sam, I just love your opinion on the idea of selling a print release instead of offering a minimum print order with the session fee. Because I find that when most people look at that session fee, they see that as their core price, and that's like, oh, that's what I'm paying, that's what I get, right? But if you offer it as like a print release instead of a minimum print order, wouldn't that also be an option? Or what are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean by a print release?
Basically giving them the freedom to go and print it themselves, and like
Right.
instead of saying you got to buy prints, you say you can go and buy prints yourself.
Yes, but you're going to have to, if you're doing that, in theory, you're going to have to charge enough for your sessions in order to operate your business.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's a part-time gig, and you're just making part-time money, that's fine. But you're losing the profit from the prints, from the craftsmanship of the prints, from you working it. That's the only catch to that. So I believe in selling the print because if I walk into a home or let's say we have a portrait, we're going to put it on this wall and this is your home, and your friends come over and they say, look at this portrait and who did it, and it's done impeccable. First of all, you as a photographer, you're going to get good advertising out of that because you know it's been done right, and that's the way it should have been done. You're the artisan at that point. You were the artist when you photographed it, and then you were the artisan when it was created. And you charged whatever you charged as far as a factor, 2.5, 2.9, 3 whatever it was, and that's okay. You made your profit, and that becomes a marketing piece at the same time. If you give them a print release where they can go to any department store without naming anything, first of all, you don't know what profile that particular printing place is going to use, and then they could be green, could be yellow, could be whatever it is. You might get a call back saying, oh, you know, I asked for high-res prints. They're telling me it's not high-res prints. In other words, they don't know what size, you don't know what size you're supposed to give them. They don't know what size they're going to print. You didn't size it up properly, and the profile is wrong. You know, you notice all the back and forth that's going on here? So you're not going to make a profit. The prints are not going to look good, and the odds of getting a repeat client are diminished, for lack of a better word. Does that make sense? Yeah.
One more here.
Sam, I think one of the challenges that many of us face is that, as you pointed out, the technology today is amazing. So everybody thinks they're a photographer.
Yes.
Very often I've encountered folks who really love the game. They love making photographs. They understand nothing of the business. They go out, they price themselves, and in relatively short order determine that this is a path to negative balance. What is your perception on underpricing oneself as starting out, and then the ability to raise your prices after the fact? Has that person established their price in the marketplace? How difficult is it to raise their price after the fact rather than getting it right using a business model like yours in the first place?
If I understood it correctly, I don't think anything's changed between now and 30 years ago. You've always had people that were underpricing. You've always had people trying to get into the marketplace where that's what they used in order to take some people out, making sure that some other studios got out of the way. I mean, the games that I've played, it's just a matter of cash flow and how strong you are. But when people are starting out, and they're not starting out with the right fundamentals, the odds are they're not going to make it. Okay? I've watched people over and over. Because I understand the way it works, right? Because it's no different from the way I operate to the way you operate. The costs are basically the same. We need about the same money to survive. So, in other words, if I see a studio that's a competitor and they're making some noise or they're not making some noise, and I can kind of tell, well, you know, that looks like a 2,000 square foot. I know basically what they're going to be basically paying. I'm not going to be off by much. They have 3 employees. We know where it is. You could actually figure out what they're going to need to survive. Maybe you would know and they don't.
But Sam, I guess today's competitor isn't somebody who wants to make a business. Today's competitor is a guy who just wants to make money to buy new gear. They don't care about, because they have another job, right? They have a full-time job. This is just a part-time gig to get some extra money to buy new gear.
That's okay, but you still need to make a profit. I mean, that's always been. There's nothing wrong with that, because we've always had part-timers that are there just to buy gear. We've always had that. It's nothing new. Nothing's changed today. The only thing is that we have some people that have cell phones that now are photographing, but all they've done is basically replace the Instamatic cameras of the past. They haven't replaced anything else. We're still using good cameras, use good photography. There's still a marketplace. Where things have changed, maybe, is that we used to have studios that had 5 or 6, 7 freelancers that were the part-timers that wanted to make money to buy gear, and they were working for the studios, so the studios had control and they were controlling price. Now the studios don't have these 7 or 8 people working for them. They're on the road themselves. So the only thing is to make sure that the part-timers, they don't have to charge as much as the studios because it doesn't make any sense mathematically. But mathematically, it does make sense based on a formula because you still have, as part-timers, they still have expenses, meaning unless the car has been subsidized by something else, it's there. The equipment needs to be coming from somewhere as far as money is concerned. It's all there. You were borrowing from something else maybe, but if you don't do it that way, you can actually make more money. There's not a wrong thing. It's just a matter of, if you're going to go out there and do it, well, make more money so you can buy better equipment. Nobody's stopping you from doing that if you can do it and do it the right, for the right reasons. Nobody's saying that you have to be at the same price as a studio because the studios have different overheads and they have different objectives. And to boot, me as a studio owner, I'm not afraid of the part-timer because your client would never hire me. And my client, chances are, would not hire you, right? So everybody has a place. Now, I'm not trying to knock anybody, but everybody has a place, so there's nothing to worry about. So everybody should just make a profit, make money, have fun, buy equipment, go have fun with it. That's all. Go travel, go photograph birds, do other things and just keep working, right? Does that make sense?
Any other questions?
Anything online?
Yeah, well, we do have we have a couple of inbox questions here, but it seems like you covered most of it in those.
Oh, really?
responses,
Okay,
but,
that's good.
I mean, I think I'll just maybe tackle one here
Yeah.
from an online from Rebecca. Said, I mean, you've really kind of covered this very thoroughly, but this might be in regards to other external factors, maybe
Yeah.
inflation and things like that. How often do you adjust and change your prices? It's kind of a general question of how often does it fluctuate? I mean, I know we have your formula, but
I have the formula, and as long as and the formulas have not changed much because I think we've been pretty stable with the way pricing has been working as far as even staff is concerned. Well, now we've gone up a little bit if you're using staff, but even products. The products really haven't changed much in the last number of years, so there hasn't been that much. Where it's changed now is we have to start watching our overheads as far as location. That is changing. So if that changes, you're going to have to adjust accordingly or reduce space in order to balance. And that's what a lot of people have been doing is if they had a 3,000 square foot studio, they might be going to a 1,500 square foot studio to rebalance what they're doing.
I see. Okay. Very good. We do have one question here.
Hi. There's a lot of groups right now online, Facebook learning groups that are promoting things like in-person sales, where it's almost like there's a bit of pressure on the client to try to purchase something just because it's more difficult to say no face-to-face to someone. Do you find that if you're selling in person that there's a higher sale, more pressure on the client, or there's a lot of people who just sell their things online, excuse me, put them in galleries, for instance, and let people click and download?
I see. Great question. Great question. I'm going to rephrase some of the wording. And some of that is, I don't believe in high-pressure sales or high-pressure in-person sales. I do believe in in-person sales, but I never pressure anything to anybody. But what I do is I show them something that they actually want to buy themselves because they got to have it. So it's the way you present it and the way you're projecting, saying this is going to be a different piece and it's going to look great. We have great lighting going on. It's going to be on this type of paper, that type of frame, and it's a gallery style portrait, and it's all of these things, all the right words and the right product in order for them to be excited to buy. The fact of them being pressured and they can't say no is to me is taboo because you'll never get them back. And this business is about people coming back. So if somebody says to me, I really enjoy I think I'm enjoying the 11 by 14 portrait because it's just right on my wall, and you tried to sell a 1620, say no, it's a little bit too big, I would not try to push them there again because they've made up their mind. And realistically, it shouldn't be a factor on what size you're selling it, because your factors have already taken care of that. So it's not about, oh, well, let's sell bigger because it's more money, but there's more cost of sales to it. So your factor, you're making money anyway. Your profit is set if it's a smaller print or a bigger print. And you have an ongoing client that's coming back. That means your marketing part of it, you can actually reduce down the road because they're coming back anyway. You don't have to keep chasing new clients. So that's why it's like a soup. You know, and there's certain ingredients and parts of it that have to be put together in order to work. And the one thing you don't want to be is like aggressive. Like I know that if I go into a place and somebody's aggressive to me to buy whatever it is, we're going to throw a car in there and the salesman's really aggressive, I'm walking out. I'm not buying anything. But if it's the car that I want and everything is presented well and everything is fair and I see value, we're going to do business. And that's it. And they have to trust you. And that's at the end of the game. They have to be able to trust you. And most of my clients, I'm going to say 99%, because you're always going to get somebody that doesn't trust for whatever reason, but the majority do trust. They call, they say, I have an event coming up at a certain date. Don't even ask me a price because they know whatever I'm going to give them, it's fair. Or it's already a repeat from before, plus minus a couple percent because it's 5 years later. And that's it. And I don't judge it any other way other than where we are and do it the right way. And, you know, that's the thing. And I want to be able to shake their hands and look at them in the face wherever I run into them, conscience clear. Yeah. And you still make your money.
Great. I think we have time for one more question here at the back. Yep.
First of all, thanks to Nikon and the presentation that you did.
Thank you.
It's quite very informal. The information
Format.
is so detailed. My question is on the wedding side, because I'm reviewing the slides. What I want to know is, for example, I marked the wedding for 20,000, right? That 20,000, I have to consider the location and how long the event will work, right? For example, the event after the wedding, they have this reception, right? And how long is the reception? Do I have to consider those things? And how I'm going to calculate those things? For example, I have already a 20,000 markup for this wedding, right? So you have this pre-FINA, the location, you have the 20,000 markup, but you guys, you have to do it away from Ontario. You have to go to Quebec. So I have to consider the distance. Well,
Travel time, yes.
travel time, and how long I'm going to stay there, because I'm going to stay at hotel. If you're going to offer me a hotel, then
It
you have to
should be over and
with the
above.
prices, right?
Yes.
So that's what I'm thinking. Because right now, I'm going to that kind of business, but I'm still new. My problem is how I'm going to penetrate that market. Because I'm thinking a lot of things. Do I have to go to the commercial side? Do I have to do this sports side? Where I have to go? Because I don't have any idea what's the pricing.
On the wedding side, you mean?
Wedding side.
On the wedding side. Well, if you're going on location, meaning you're going out of the country or going into a different province, let's say, there's always travel time that has to be calculated. Of course, you cannot calculate a travel time because you won't get the job if you double and triple your price on that. So you have to take your package. That doesn't change. But what has to change is, okay, how much an hour do you want to go out there the day before and come back the day after? So is it $100 an hour? Is it $150 an hour? Then are you driving? So vehicle expense. If you're flying, they pay your flight. So there's no profit to be made on that. Your flight's your flight. But your $150 an hour for the day to get out there and to come back, that's fine. You know what I mean? $150 an hour or something like that. So you might charge $1,000 for one day, $1,000 for the other day, plus whatever you charge for the wedding day. Plus expenses, hotel fees, stuff like that. I mean, being reasonable too, right? So, you know, no 6-star hotels.
Sam, I think we got one more here
Yes.
online. This one comes from Cloud. He asks, what about doing stock photography? We didn't really touch on that, but do you have any opinions about it? It might be a very open-ended question, but do you have any
It is an
insights of-
open-ended question because that I think stock photography in a lot of ways you could make a lot of money on stock photography. I know that in the past people have made a lot of money on stock photography, and it really depends on how good that image is and how much volume you can actually sell, because it's about that. And I guess it depends also where you're putting it and how much they're getting back from it. I mean, you know, what's the kickback on that stock photography? So if you're not going to make much on it, then there's no point in doing that. But if you have some good images, people are always looking for stock photography to buy. But it's always about getting that right one that can sell a lot of volume. So it's always about the volume when you're dealing with that, and not about, you know, selling a few images, because then you're not going anywhere with it. You want to be able to get a good quarterly check continuously.
Okay, I think we had a lot of good questions here tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming, especially you, Sam. I
Thank
think
you.
a lot of us here are going to be rewatching this tonight on Facebook.
Oh,
It was
good.
like our own personal mentor over here. So again, thank you all here coming tonight in our headquarters in Nikon Canada. Thank you online for watching, and thank you, Sam, for
Thank
a
you.
very
Pleasure.
informative session. Extremely informative.
Thank you very much. Thank you.